What's going on, everyone? And welcome to another episode of Writing Friction. And as always, today's guest is pretty cool. Everyone say hello to Bob Lefsetz. How are you, Bob?
I'm doing okay.
Yeah, you bunkering down. Are you in Southern California still?
I'm in Southern California. Normally, I go to Colorado pretty much for the whole month of December, but I
Mhm.
don't want to get COVID 19. I got a pre existing condition and I'm in the age group, so I'm taking quarantining very seriously.
It's pretty unbelievable. I mean, obviously, you for people who don't know, Bob is coming from the music world. And right now we're during COVID and there's no concerts. Normally I'd be on what is it? It's almost December. I'd be going to Madison Square Garden right now to be seeing Fish for 4 nights. That's
Right?
typically what I'd be doing, but that's not what life is right now. Are you in Santa Monica area? You've been there for a long
No,
time,
I've
right?
been in Santa Monica for 40 years. I moved to Sherman Oaks, which doesn't have the creds. I'm up in the hills in LA,
But you're an
no
East
longer
Coast
in Santa
guy.
Monica.
You're East
What?
Coast originally.
Oh, yeah, I grew up in the East Coast. Grew up in Connecticut, went to college in Vermont. Then I was a starving freestyle skier in Utah. Then I went to law school in LA. I've been in LA since the 70s, mid 70s.
Okay, I'm from Jersey originally, but I moved to SF in 2011 because I joined a band that would be my touring life for like 5 or 6 years. But I've been in SF ever since. Um, Kind of bring people up to speed. You worked originally in as entertainment lawyer before you started
No,
writing your letter.
I would not say that. I mean, let's go back.
Yeah, you
Uh,
correct me.
I was a big skier. I went to Middlebury College. I went for three reasons. A, it was co ed. B, it's beautiful campus to this day, but it also had its own ski area. I'm sure I skied more at Middlebury than any other student there. And the first year I was at Middlebury, phenomenal conditions, and the next 3 years got worse and worse. And I wanted to do more skiing, and therefore I moved to Salt Lake City. Little Cottonwood Canyon, which is Alton Snowbird, has the best snow in the world. That's well acknowledged. The moisture is pulled out by the Great Salt Lake. And what I did not know when I moved there because it's got the most guaranteed snow in America. It was the epicenter of freestyle skiing. I got involved with those people. Uh, I choked in competition. And then I realized it's going to take a couple of years to get past because I ski with these people all day,
Yeah,
every
yeah.
day, the world champion, whatever. And I said, well, I could spend a couple of years doing that. And, where's that going to lead me? Secondly, a lot of people in the ski world end up not skiing because you can't make that much money unless you're at the absolute peak
Mm-hmm.
of being a professional skier. And many people stop skiing completely. And I said, that's not who I want to be. My father always said he would pay for law school. The first time I signed up for the LSATs, my friends knocked on my college dorm room door and said, "You're not taking the LSAT." And I said, "You're right." And we went to Montreal.
Had you had
But I,
plans to be a lawyer your whole life? Was that something you always wanted to do?
I'm an upper, well, it wasn't at the time, a middle class Jew.
Same
Okay.
here.
And your parents, always want you to be a professional, a doctor, a lawyer. I was not the scientific type. So you heard that from day one. And your parent, it's very different from today. Um, First and foremost, if you were not educated at a collegiate level, you could make a living. You could live on minimum wage. You can't do that anymore. Also, there wasn't this level of income inequality. Now, if you grew up in the 60s, which I did, it was all about finding yourself, testing limits, and many people did that. People don't do that at all today because life is too hard. And if you are an educated person, you're looking for insurance. Whatever insurance a legal career might have been, that's almost secondary today to be working for the bank, etc. And as a result, a lot of the best and the brightest go to work in these soul sucking professions. Amor Towles, who's really got a good reputation now, he started as a banker.
Mm-hmm.
His writing teacher at Yale, because I heard him speak once at somebody's house, and said, "Hey, you're really good." He said, "No, no, I got to go to the bank." So in any event, uh, I went to law school because I'd had the worst case of mononucleosis. Literally, it lasted 6 months, and my father said he would pay for it. It was terrible. I hated it, but two things happened. One, it was the worst year in history for snow in Salt Lake City. No one ever believed me, but there was another bad year in 11, 12, and then they reference this. This is 76, 77. So when I called my friends in Utah, I said, "We're going home. There's no snow." This is before snowmaking. And then I fell in with a woman, and that carried me through law school. and I wanted to pass the bar because I'm the type of person who finishes stuff, but I never had an intention to practice law. At the time, the record companies were run by lawyers. That is not the case at this particular moment. And I figured this would be a good background. My father was a real estate appraiser who also owned a liquor store. I had no connections in this particular world. I did
Music
practice.
world.
Yes, I did practice law a little bit, but I haven't practiced law for decades. I still can if I want to, but
But growing up, I mean, you obviously were a music fan, and obviously, I'm assuming a fan of literature as well, correct?
I'm a voracious reader and always have been.
Always have been. So, do you remember?
Always have been. I was the kid from the Arrow Book Club who would order 6 books. I'd go to the library, take out 9 books. Always driving.
What did you start off reading? And can you remember like the earliest things? I mean, I was born in 1987, so my reading began with R.L. Stine, the Goosebumps series. That was like my first steady reading. But obviously, you're a different generation. What do you remember reading back then?
Oh God, how come I can't remember the name of this book? I can still see the cover. We have Mike Mulligan and his steam shovel, I think is what it's called, something like that. And we didn't have all those series. So the series that I remember were like Beezus and Ramona.
Okay.
Beverly Cleary stuff. And I read a lot of sports books. I would read anything and everything. And children's literature was not quite the thing it is today. But
were you writing at that time? Because I heard you talking in another. So you weren't doing any creative writing at all. You weren't doing any.
When I was in first grade, no.
Well, I'm talking about going into high school and up through college. I mean, you're bumming around skiing.
I was in school in the '60s in a middle class suburb. Different from today. There was enough money to pay for paper for the Mimeo machine, and we had some very creative teachers. When I was a sophomore, Mrs. Hurley, she took us to plays in New York City. I grew up 50 miles from New York City. She took us to see plays. She took us to see Janice Ian, who had a big song called Society's Child. This was long before at 17 in what is now David Geffen Hall. At the time was Philharmonic Hall. In between it was Avery Fisher Hall in New York. And it really kind of comes down to this one thing. A friend of mine was the editor of the school newspaper. Well, a friend was an editor of school newspaper when I was a junior, and I wrote sports stuff. But a different friend became editor of the school newspaper when I was a senior in high school. And this is the 60s, so it's about testing limits. There were even underground newspapers in high school. So in any event, the Crimson Crier, it was then Andrew Ward High School in now called Fairfield Ward in Fairfield, Connecticut. And people may or may not remember, but I guess most people know there was the whole Paul is dead thing. Paul McCartney. That was in the fall of 1969. And we were sitting around laughing, talking about, well, what if the headmaster? It was a public high school, but they called the principal.
I mean, did people think that was bullshit when it was happening?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, of course.
But we laughed about it. You sit around with your friends.
Yeah, of course.
If, Peterson, was fake. And I wrote something about it. And it was front page, was usually successful. And I wrote something else. And that was the beginning. It's interesting because I wanted to go to Middlebury. Once again, I went to college because my parents told me to. I was not excited about going to college. I didn't necessarily want to learn anything.
Yeah.
I applied early decision and I filled out the form straightforwardly and I did not get in. I knew I could always go to Boston University because my mother went there. And
my dad went there.
Okay. And my sister did not get in. My older sister did not get into the college of her choice. So at this point, I just wrote whatever I wanted.
Yeah.
So I would, color out, now everything's via computer. But back then when you had to literally fill out these forms, they'd say, what magazines do you read? And to this day, I read more magazines than anybody I've ever met. It's like, I would use, I would go to the side of the application and I would send these articles. And I remember, God, I can make these stories so long. I'll try not to. I'll make it very short. I used that stuff. My irreverent personality got me into Columbia. I did not go to Columbia for 2 reasons. One, because a guy I had been on a summer program with, he wanted me to room with him, and I didn't. And I didn't see how I could say no. Secondly, I'm a big skier. What
Okay.
I did not know about Middlebury College, granted, I went at this point, I started in 1970, very traditional.
Yeah.
Now, one advantage was 45% of the people were prep school kids.
Yeah.
And growing up in a melting pot suburb, I had not interacted with wealthy people.
Definitely
That
not.
taught me how to interact with wealthy people. And as one gets successful in the entertainment business, you run into a lot of household names and powerful and rich people. That helped. I didn't get uptight. Um, but they have a very conservative upbringing, and the school was very traditional. And I chafed at that. The funny thing is, moving to LA, I have friends who went to UCLA. They're exactly like me.
Yeah.
You know, I had more records than anybody else.
Yeah.
We did have, they now call it J term. We had 414. January took a different subject, and I did convince them to let me teach a class about rock music, which
Well,
I
had
did.
the idea of moving to Los Angeles always been in your head? I mean, you're talking about at a time when that.
Let me go through
Yeah.
this. Let me go through this because I can answer that question. But
Okay.
you're getting to the writing thing, and this is critical.
Yeah.
Okay. And so if you go to a small place like Middlebury College, not a big department. There's one teacher in certain departments. Like I remember psychology was a hip subject. There was one teacher. Everybody said that teacher sucks. Don't take psychology. And I never
Yeah.
did. The writing courses were taught by this guy, John Claggett, who wrote Sea Stories poorly. And I would write, and for those of us who've seen the producer's movie, it would be like Springtime for Hitler. People's jaws would drop.
Most definitely.
And then I finally wrote something about going to see an Alice Cooper concert in 1972.
Oh yeah.
And the teacher said, that was good. Finally said something good. And he said, but it needed a twist. A twist. This is 1972. The new journalism is already over. Forget
Had he
it. I
broke by
never.
then?
What?
Had Alice broke by then?
I was a huge Alice Cooper fan. If you want to talk Alice Cooper, no
I
one's going to
mean-
listen to no book people are going to listen to this podcast by the time I get through. Alice Cooper was a joke. He had two albums on Frank Zappa's label.
Yeah.
Then he Pretty's for You and Easy Action. They then got this guy Bob Ezrin, who was famous for a number of things, but he's certainly famous for producing the Alice Cooper records, Kiss Destroyer, and Pink Floyd The Wall.
Fish.
Yes, among many other things. And he did a record within the third record, Love It to Death. And they had this song, I'm 18, which was good. Okay. But you're still not going to buy an Alice Cooper record.
No.
You would read about it at Rolling Stone.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because some of these people have legends far exceeding the reality of the time. I was really addicted to Rolling Stone. I would go to college. You got to study hard at a place like Middlebury, which I tried my best not to do. But I would read Rolling Stone cover to cover. It would come on Tuesday every other week. And I'd try to finish all my studying by Tuesday, Wednesday at the latest, so I could read Rolling Stone. And in the review section, there was a boxed off review, which meant it was important, by this act Alice Cooper called Killer. It was written by Lester Bangs.
Mm-hmm.
He was not known as some great person like he was before. People are not going to, there's a lot of deep rock history. But in the fall of 69, okay, there was something called the Great White Wonder. It was a hoax in Rolling Stone, okay? So there were all these legendary people were going to have this rock concert in the wake of Woodstock. Turned out to be a hoax. So when I read this review, I said, this is a hoax.
Yeah.
But I'm going to buy the record just to see. You drop the needle on that record. The song is called Under My Wheels. You're closed immediately.
Uh-huh.
So I was into it from then, and I had seen the tour. This was before he really broke with the next album. His next album, School's Out, and then $1 Billion Babies, I think is how it went.
Yeah. So you write this Alice Cooper piece. I mean, this is the first time you've written something like that, right? I mean, this was kind of your first foray into writing what would become kind of your technique.
Well, if you go to a place like Middlebury College, there are no objective tests.
Yeah.
No fill in the blanks, no A, B, C, D.
Yeah.
You are writing papers for every class, multiple papers. So it wasn't like I never wrote anything.
Obviously not.
But those are very straightforward. My style was very close to my style today. It's evolved a little bit. Okay. I can get on my high horse and really alienate all your audience right now. I don't know whether I should do it now or whether I should do it later because I don't do it how anybody else does it.
You don't. But that's what's interesting. I mean, again, to turn the camera on to me, I got introduced to you because I am one of the people you were writing for, right? I'm not some big name fucking producer. I'm not some TikTok guy. I'm the dude who's in the van, driving to the clubs and trying to believe in some dream that might still exist, right? So when I became privy to you, you were writing shit that was just straightforward, that anyone could digest. You weren't bullshitting anyone. You say it yourself all the time. There's too much bullshit out there. The world's full of a lot of crap, and you kind of were starting to break it down. So when you say your style started back then, what kind of pushed you over the edge? Why did you stop being a lawyer? Do you remember writing that first letter? Questions like these.
I can answer these questions in 15 seconds, or I'm going to go a little bit longer.
Please do.
These are crucial things.
Yeah.
I never wrote another thing in college.
Mm-hmm.
My dream at that point had been to move to San Francisco and write for Rolling Stone. It wasn't something I was active about. It's like in the back of my mind, that's when Rolling Stone was still in San Francisco.
Oh, yeah.
Needless to say, after that sophomore experience, I never wrote another thing. So if that's 1972, in 1984, I'm working for this company, Sanctuary Music, which has been through a few iterations since then, but it's always managed Iron Maiden.
I was going to say they were the genesis of Iron Maiden, yeah.
So, and the same guy, Rod Smallwood, still manages them. I ran the U.S. operation. Rod could only be in the U.S. certain limited time. He's got a partner, Andy Taylor, because of tax reasons. Mm-hmm. In any event, one of the big things at the time, since Iron Maiden was the biggest selling act for Capitol throughout the world, Rod had a lot of power. And when you have a lot of power, we had this act WASP that I've been involved in. That's how they were connected to Sanctuary Music. But you get to hire an independent publicity company. Yeah. You would not want to use the people who are working for the label. All of this has changed a little bit, but let me roll with it. They would send these bios. The bios were horrific. I would always have to rewrite them. Mm-hmm. So that job did not last over a creative issue.
I mean, just editing. I mean, you weren't rewriting the bio.
You had to rewrite it. So terrible.
That bad. Okay?
Yeah. Wow. There are a lot of tangents here that may or may not be interesting to your audience. What most people don't realize is the only thing in the newspaper that's news, generally speaking, is hard news. Somebody shot somebody, there's a war. Everything else is placed by publicity agents. They pitch people and they put there, okay? And they have these bios as information.
Yeah.
Now, all the local outlets are dying, but they would sometimes just copy the bio, okay? So this has been a function of the music business ever since forever, okay? So you have to make it readable. But that job ended. Those jobs are very well paid. And after about a year and a half, I ran out of money. I worked on a couple of movies, etc. Then I went to see this job counselor. There's a legendary job-seeking book called What Color Is Your Parachute? Turns out it has a workbook. I never knew that. And the job counselor says, here's this workbook. Write 6 essays, brag about yourself. This is 12 years later. Okay. Actually, no, it's in 1986. So it's 14 years later. And I write those essays and I get back in touch with the fact that I like to write. Okay. I said, let me write some stuff and send it to magazines. And when the rejections come back, I go, wait a second. This is just like the music business. You have to know these people. God. These are not the people I know.
That's something I really want to talk to you about. I'm a new writer. The publishing world and the record, they almost run parallel businesses from my end. It's a big conglomerate. You have agents, you have publisher, you have all these things. And I didn't realize that until I published my first book in February. And, my whole life I spent trying to get a record deal. And it was always the same thing. You had to submit the press kits. And, I'm from like the early 2000s, back then and up till now. But yeah, it's interesting you say that, how there are similarities between these two businesses, and maybe you could talk about that a little more. But yeah, so 1986, yeah.
Well, I could talk about that a lot. That's part of what I'm going to write to talk about. It's probably going to piss people off, but let me finish this narrative. When the rejections come back, I say, well, you got to know these people.
Yeah.
And I was eating a hamburger at a place called Flaky Jake's at Pico and Sepulveda. It's no longer a hamburger joint now; it's various retail establishments. And I'm reading Billboard, which has been up and down. Now it's really down again. It went up a little bit after this particular moment with this guy Timothy White, but it was terrible. And I'm reading. I go, this is terrible. I could do a better job than this. And all of a sudden, a bell goes off in my brain. I said, wait a second, aren't there computers? Maybe I can actually do something. I had the idea, which is funny thinking about it all these years later. I went home, woke up my girlfriend. She said I should do it, but I didn't quite have the chutzpah. And then I said, I read this book about risking. I said, I'm going to do it. I had a credit card for being a lawyer with $5,000 credit because I was broke.
Yeah.
And I went and bought a Mac Plus. This is spring of 1986, excuse me. I immediately became fascinated with computers. That was not something I was ever interested in. I famously said, I'm not going to get a computer until you can talk to it, which you can do today. But it was incredibly powerful. And this is when Macs and PCs, it was a huge space in between.
Yeah.
I became fascinated. And so I started the newsletter. I charged for it. Generally speaking, only the most successful people subscribe, the heads of all the labels.
Well, can I stop you there? Just real quick. You had been working in this field for a decade prior before you started.
No.
You weren't.
I didn't graduate from law school until 1979. I worked in the movie and music business for the ensuing years, but I was not a well-known person.
But you were around it well enough to want to write about it, obviously. You were there.
Let me ask you again here, Michael. Who's your audience?
My audience? At this point, it's changing. It keeps evolving to the point where I thought it was just going to be people who want to write books to now people who are just trying to find other ways to be creative. And hearing you talk as a lawyer and then wanting to become a writer was similar to me as, being a musician and wanting to become a writer. And it's weird because there's a lot of people out there who are listening to this podcast who are doing things that they don't want to do. And they want to start doing something else, whether it be writing. Most of them are writers. A lot of musicians. But yeah, that's who the audience seems to be. And I think the things you're saying are, to me are interesting. I think they'll be motivational to the people hearing them too.
Okay. How about people who are successful writers? Are they listening to this?
I mean, everyone oh yeah, for sure. I mean, especially the authors I've been speaking with. Phil Cly, Joan Silver.
Now, I'm more interested in the audience.
Yeah, I mean.
Okay, let me get on my high horse.
Yeah, get on your high horse, yeah.
Whenever I speak, and I speak a lot professionally, when the wannabes talk to me, the very first thing I tell them is give up.
Yeah.
Music is not identical to book writing, but people have no fucking idea how difficult it is to be successful.
Oh, yeah.
There's an old Don Henley song. The song's not that great, but the lyric is good. How bad do you want it? Not bad enough. I remember the first day of law school, the counselor comes in and they say, if you're here to be in the entertainment field, you should drop out right now. I didn't want to go to begin with. I thought about dropping out. And then I said, turns out I'm the only person who needed to be in it that badly. And I can tell you, people, you want to have a house, you want to have a family, you want to have cars, you want to send your kids to college. Don't be in a creative field. Well, it is almost impossible.
In your podcast, Michael Connolly, that's what you talk about. He talks about that too. Yeah, but his parents.
Michael Connolly had a career as a writer. He was a journalist.
His parents were
that used to be a way to make a living as a writer. I know a friend of mine's kid got a master's in journalism, tried had to give up. There were no jobs.
Yeah.
People should not do this. You should be a fan. Music is even harder. It's a little different. What people don't realize is this is one of the things I like about music as opposed to TV or movies. I'm going to be really negative now. I'm going to turn off a lot of the audience because I am if you hear all this and you say at the end of the day, shit, that makes me, but I still have to do it, fine. Okay. But when it comes to music, the people in it, about the most they can say is had a good beat and I could dance to it.
Oh yeah.
You put a 5-year-old in front of a TV show, okay, with prompting, they can do 5 or 10 minutes. Oh, the characters weren't believable, the story didn't make sense, etc. Everybody can write. They learn that in school, okay? So they think they can be a writer. Let me start with the primary. A, all of these factories, all of this stuff is complete horseshit. I read a lot, okay? And I tended not to read books, but my girlfriend bought me a Kindle in 2009, and now I've been reading voraciously, mostly fiction thereafter.
Only on Kindle?
I get, nature of my life is I get sent a lot of books.
I'd imagine.
So if someone sends me a book, I'll read. The anti-Kindle thing, I mean, you don't have enough time for me to be angry and break enough norms. Let me get this straight. People are on their phone all day long. They're in front of their laptop or desktop, but they can't read a book on a screen. Okay. I went to school. I remember lugging books back and forth. People don't even do that anymore. The kids that you think the kids today are going to be in physical books. I'm not talking about coffee table books, etc. If you know anything, and people are so standoffish they don't know, is that the e-ink technology using a Kindle is such, it is harder to read a book on an iPad. My girlfriend does it, but it's easier on the eyes. And I remember somebody sent me a book, very good. I can't remember the name right now, just recently, about a woman who traces her family during World War II. He sends me the physical book. It's almost unreadable because the type is so damn small.
Yeah.
I'm used to a Kindle, and on a Kindle, you can change the type to whatever size you want. But because it doesn't understand, this is, the publishing business is so small. And, the music business, unfortunately, starting about 30 years ago, started to, people started to wear suits, etc. It's a down and dirty street business. Where the book business, where there's a lot fewer zeros involved, it's about status, okay? And the money's less important. And so there's a lot of BS involved. So if you go to the end consumer, when I first got my Kindle, every book was under $10. It was a whim to buy a book. And that is exactly what Bezos wanted to do. But no, there's a value in books, just like there was a value in records. We have to pay $14 for 10 songs. They raised the price. Now a physical book can be the same price as a digital book. I don't like to be raped, okay, which is what they're doing to me. They could grow the audience with digital books, but they won't.
Well, it's interesting. I bought a book today. Have you heard of this?
Utopia, absolutely.
Are you okay?
I'm not a fan of. I've read Jacob DeZoe. I'm not a fan of David Mitchell.
This will be my first book of his. The thing is, I picked up this book because it's about a band, and I just finished my first novel about a rock and roll band. Albeit this takes place in a different time and era. But what I wanted to ask you is, I got this book because it was recommended to me by someone who knew I was writing about a band. You're probably getting shit all the time. People listen to this, read that. How are you even divvying up your time at this point? How are you finding the time to read? How do you choose?
Yeah. This is the best book about bands. Unfortunately, it's out of print.
Good.
But I guarantee you can find it on eBay.
Yeah, what's it called?
It's called The Wishbones.
Okay.
It's by Tom Perrotta.
Okay.
Tom Perrotta is a very famous writer. This is one of his very first books.
Yeah, okay.
As they get to the later stuff, it's more stylized. This is straightforward, really fucking good.
Yeah, well, the book I'm writing, it's interesting. I'm basing it around a college band, a one-hit wonder around the late 90s, early 2000s, but I kind of take you throughout that whole arch of a band. I want to ask you, though, we were saying before this, how are you choosing what to read now? I mean, or do you read, if you like an author, do you read all of their books?
Life is precious.
It is. Reading takes a long time.
I am very, very busy. There's not enough time in a day. Generally speaking, I don't trust any recommendations by any readers, whether it become music or books. People don't understand the concept of recommendation. It's not what you'd like. When you recommend something, it's a responsibility to understand what the person would like. Okay. So when I recommend stuff, I keep that in mind and I put qualifiers if it's not for a certain person. The David Mitchell stuff, I know people love that stuff,
Yeah.
but it is not easy to read.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's not like I don't like things that are uneasy to read, but I don't find it satisfying.
Yeah.
So I would never recommend that book. And
Speaking
there's
of
a lot of
uneasy,
stuff that gets reviews that, yeah, I know it's about a band, but that's not the style I like. So what
yeah.
I do is I am constantly going through reviews, looking for what is great. I only have time for great. And then I will cross it with Amazon reviews and other reviews, see if it qualifies. If it's interesting, or if I'm reading an article and somebody mentions a book, I say, okay, then I will download the sample chapter. There's a lot of stuff I start immediately say, this is not my style. I delete it. Okay. But there's other stuff I stay with. That is how I find my stuff. I have to go on my own personal journey.
You ever read shit about the music business? I mean, I once read that book, Hitmen, by Frederick
Hitman
Donen.
is an excellent book. It's the best one. Mansion on the Hill is another great one. Most of the books since the turn of the century have been about the disruption in the music business. And having lived through that, there's certainly nothing in those books I don't know. And it would be a very young person who might be interested in that. There's a really good book about ticketing called Ticketmasters. And I know these people, but it's not that readable a book. The content is definitely there. So, just going back to a point I was making earlier, the number one criterion in writing, number one, is readability.
Mm-hmm.
Second, content is secondary. So all these people with their flowery sentences, whatever. And then there are other people. Plot. If you're writing fiction, plot is key. It's a story. And when you look at the highfalutin in New York, I remember Claire Massoud was pissed off. She was, people were, she wasn't nominated for an award. Yeah, I read that book. The point is, was so concerned about the style of writing that plot was secondary.
Well, authors, and nowadays it seems like authors are, if you spend time on Instagram and Twitter, we talked about this on the podcast, they're becoming their own, persona. Whereas, I'd imagine Philip Roth could have walked around Lower Manhattan in the 70s and not many people would have known who he was. But nowadays, Philip Roth would have to have 1 million followers. He'd have to be posting fucking stories. So it's interesting, with the, I see your face. Well, with the advancement of technology, how it's also affected the medium. But if we can, I just want to get back to just where you first started. And if you don't mind me asking, you have an encyclopedic knowledge of the music industry, starting when you started writing about it from 1986. Two questions. One, do you ever have plans to release a compilation of all the letters in some form? And two, are you ever going to write a book?
I would never write a book. One of the most ridiculous things of all time. People know if you have a calling to write fiction, go for it. If you think writing is a difficult process, stop. Okay? What people don't realize, we have a very fast moving society. You probably already turned this podcast off. Okay, people say kids today have a short attention span. No, they have incredible shit detectors. Yeah. Something they'll like, they'll binge 50 episodes of some TV show, but they'll say no. So you spend years writing your book.
Yeah.
And it's usually over in a day. Okay. Even the biggest authors say, well, this one isn't that good. Wrote the famous book about the motorcycles in Spain. She wrote a recent book. They even excerpted in the New York Times. Complete stiff. My goal is to be interacting with the audience on a very regular basis and be immediate. I don't have a desire. If I had a big desire, I don't write fiction anyway.
I mean, I think not a fiction book. I'm saying an insider's book.
No. I mean, what am I going to do? I'm going to write a whole topic. Let's put it this way. I know these people who write these books that are reviewed in the New York Times. I'm talking about music books.
Yeah.
I remember one of the famous ones. He's a rock writer. I'm on the phone with him, and I said, well, how many copies did it sell? Under 10,000. But we're coming out in paperback, probably sell another 5,000.
Yeah. If
I reached under 10,000 people a day, I would stop. I would stop doing what I'm doing now completely. I'm not in it.
You call it a dead tree market?
If you're an artist, the number one criterion, forget Gene Simmons is completely full of shit. You can see me debating him online, but
Oh,
whatever.
I know you
Okay,
have
but
something.
the
Yeah, but
point is you want to reach more people.
yeah.
And people don't understand. Your friends and family will always say what you're doing is great. The question is someone who has no relationship with you, will they tell another party to experience your art? If not, you need to either get better or change it.
Mhm.
So people don't understand. People don't understand what writing a book is. Okay. They put everything in. The key is what you leave out because it's got to be a story. Most people don't know what writing a book is like. They have a cover and they put it together. Not a week goes by that I don't get a book about the music business. Almost all of them are unreadable, but the worst are the self published ones.
Yeah.
They think if they put all the information in there, it's a book. But who the hell would read that book?
And with books, it's a lot different than music. I write a riff on my guitar. You're going to tell me within 3-5 seconds whether it's even worth pursuing or whether it sticks with you. In a book, we have to get them first sentence, the first paragraph, the first page. And if you, I mean, it's so easy to just pick up a book at a bookstore, read a sentence, put it down, like, fuck this, I don't want it. And the author spent 5-6 years writing that book.
Once again, and as I say, if I haven't pissed off everybody in the audience already, I'm going to do it now. I don't do it that way at all. Some of the greatest records of all time have been written. The song's been written in less than 15 minutes, recorded in equivalent time.
Yeah.
Okay. The problem with so much writing is it's overthought. I work on inspiration. I immediately know because if I'm hot, it's going to be enticing. If I'm not hot, the odds of it being great are low. So those people, most people think, this is, as I say, by time I'm through, I'm going to be the most hated guy on the planet here. But the concept of, well, let me sharpen my pencils, get some coffee, let me rewrite. My goal is a page a day or whatever. I don't do it that way at all.
Yeah.
I get totally revved up, turn a record up to 11 and it comes out. And the other thing is, when it's great. Mm-hmm. I have written stuff for so long, the so-called 10,000 hours. I'm never going to do something terrible, but it's very hard to hit it over the fence, have a grand slam. Okay. When you do, I am writing alone in my house. I immediately know the response is going to be overwhelming. When you do something that well. So if you are focusing on the first sentence and the first page, you're already going down the wrong path.
Mm-hmm. Do you release a letter right after you write it?
Absolutely.
Really?
And I will write nothing in advance. That's part of the process.
So the process also involves being alone in a room and blasting the records to 11. How do you choose what to write about? I mean, is it the news of
the
day?
Pure inspiration.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean? I mean, but now we're not, the music industry is not dead right now, but the live business is pretty dead. What's inspiring you to write about the music business right now? I mean,
I don't write solely about the music business.
I know you write about books. You write about technology.
I write about my life.
Everything.
Right now, it's streaming television is defining the culture. I watched this show called The Bureau from France, and the second season is considered to be the best French television of all time. I'm not sure I agree with it. It's another show I recommend called Spiral. The guy has a way of building tension that's unbelievable, but I didn't want to write about it till it's over. Okay. There were a couple of times I was really feeling it. Mm-hmm. Now I'm not writing about The Bureau until I really feel it, mm-hmm. because otherwise it's just information. Mm-hmm. But I mean, if I have a zing to it, if people can feel my passion, if they know what's going on, then they're interested in reading. Whether they like what I have to say or not, that's a completely different issue.
Mm-hmm. I mean, are you going to just write till you can't write anymore? I mean, that's the plan. I mean, do you have any end goal for this? It's just, you just keep doing it. Just something you love to do, right? I mean, I don't see how you could ever
till I can't do it anymore.
Yeah, how can you ever
be able to do it till I die?
Person doing this, and I mean, again, like for people who are listening to this podcast and have not read the Lefsetz Letter, I'm not going to blow smoke up your ass, but you write about and you just say it like it is, and no one's really doing that. And again, I know you famously don't talk about how many subscribers you have. Obviously, you have a lot. I know Tom Marshall tried to get it out of you, but he
No,
couldn't.
the point is, we live in a world where everybody lies. If something, this we're not in a physical sales era anymore. But if someone said they sold 100,000 independent records, maybe they sold 2,500.
Mm-hmm.
I'll use I know famous people. I can tell you lie after lie. It's all complete horseshit. All I will say is, when I write something, more than six figures of people read it.
Mm-hmm. Bob, this has been an absolute pleasure. I know it's Christmas Eve, and you got two Jews here. What are you reading right now? I know you got some time, things to do. What's on your plate right now?
I just finished this book that was overrated. Hold on a second. Let me turn on and look at because when you read on a Kindle, I must admit, a lot of times I
Do you read multiple books at a time, or just one
no,
book at a time?
no, just one book at a time.
And always
And
fiction, or I mean,
yep.
one, but you go back and forth.
No, I understand what you said. I read this book, Oligarchy.
Yeah.
Really overrated. Before that, I'm a huge Curtis Sittenfeld fan. Her short story collections, You Say It, I, whatever it is, uh, you can find it. Phenomenal. Best book of that year. Gary Steingart, I'm not a huge fan, but the last novel was the best thing I read that particular year.
Did you
Um,
end up reading Cirque? I know you talked about that with Chelsea Handler on that podcast. She was
do I end
talking
up
about
reading what?
Cirque is CIRCE.
Circe. I
Circe,
haven't read
yeah.
that yet because it's really not my kind of book. I know it's
Yeah.
something people love.
Yeah,
Okay.
everyone
I
keeps
read
talking about.
Fraternity. That guy is a pretty good writer,
Well,
but a children's Bible, a little bit, in terms of I'm going to recommend something, that's a little bit different from what I'm reading because all the stuff I'm reading is not, there's a lot of stuff people talk about that's just,
do you
not
find that
I
similar?
really like Curtin Sittenfeld's Rodham. I like Mrs. Everything. You know, I could go on and on with shit I've read.
Do you find? I mean, if you don't, if I could ask a couple more questions, if you don't mind. We were talking earlier in the podcast about the similarities between the record industry and the book publishing world. I mean, do you see the same thing as that, where albums are being put out all the time, pumped out, and hopefully you get that one hit that pays for everything? I mean, in your instance, is this similar in the publishing industry where there's so many fucking books that get published?
Okay,
And
let me talk for a second and don't interrupt me.
go for it.
I want to give my philosophy on this. There are the James Pattersons. Most of the other people writing successful books, i.e., they're reviewed well, the New York Times, the WAPO, they sell a certain amount. People cannot live off the income of those books. Almost all of them are college professors. An incredible number have been taught in those factories themselves, the Iowa workshop, whatever. If you watch Girls, where the girl goes to the Iowa workshop, she doesn't fit in. That's my philosophy. They teach you to conform. I am a big believer writers are born, not made. It's something that you come with, okay? Now, Mitsuko Uchida, the big Mozart pianist, she had an article in Newsweek, at this point it's 25 years ago, said, I tell all my students to try really hard and do something great, because if you're great, people will find you. But very few people are great. The publishing business is similar to the music business today in that barrier to entry is non existent. Everybody can self publish. In addition, everybody on the other side of the fence has everything available. It used to be if a band came to your town, another band might not come, so you go to see that band.
Mm-hmm.
So you're competing against the history of literature. Make no mistake, the people at the pinnacle in music, and I'm talking about only recording streams, I'm not talking about the road and branding and whatever. People at the top of the publishing business, they're making a fucking fortune.
Yeah.
It's just there are very few of those. So if you need to write and you are unique, there's probably some sort of space with you. But I can tell you about starving along the way. I don't think the average person would do that. Okay. I'm divorced. I don't own a house. Okay. And I'm doing very well now. But 25 years ago, I was really scraping by on the verge of suicide. I don't think most people are willing to commit that hard. I mean, I was talking to a famous musician everybody knows yesterday. He was saying, well, after his first band broke up, he was couch surfing for a couple of years.
Oh yeah.
I didn't have a dollar. Most people are unwilling to do that. So my goal is to scare everybody away other than those who need to do it. How many times people told me, oh, I'm writing a book. I'm writing a book. And they write the book. The publishers reject. They self-publish. Nothing happens.
Yeah.
Being able to write is easier than being able to play a few chords. But to write something that people want to read is something completely different. The other thing is conveying information is different from style. First and foremost, I am a writer. Subject is secondary. Okay. Whether it be movies, music, it's about the writing.
And, again, only because it's so fresh in my mind, that Michael Connelly podcast. I mean, this guy has sold millions, and he's still writing every single day. He talks about it. It's something he has to do. Again, a lot of people, I own a dog walking business. That's how I'm able to live in San Francisco. I started my business. I was able to tour as a musician because I own my own business. I was doing the things that I needed to do in order to pursue what I wanted to pursue. But yeah, it's not easy. And I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. These things aren't for everyone. And failure is a big part of it. We had Janet Fitch on. She got rejected, 100 times. And then she wrote White Oleander, and, it kind of blew up for her. Yeah, but you're not pissing off people. You're talking the truth. And that's what you talk about in your letters. I mean, why is that a bad
guess
thing?
The other thing is a lot of rejection is legitimate.
Of course.
Just because it's like the 10,000 hour rule. I established I'm a big skier. There's another book that is not as readable, though not hard to read, called The Talent Code, that goes into the science of the 10,000 hours.
Yeah.
It's 10,000 hours of hard practice.
Mm-hmm.
So I say, I'm a big skier. You spend 10,000 hours on the bunny slope, you're not going to be a world-class skier. You're challenging yourself. You're risking. That is how you build up the skill. So, I don't want to say failure is a badge of honor, because there are a lot of people who fail and deserve to fail. Okay. And they just see, it's Silicon Valley. That's more about experience. Someone's been there, and that's why, they get another job. But this is what I always say. People are not lining up to be garbage men. Okay. Honest profession, actually in cities, hard to kind of get the job.
Not bad.
People are lining up to work for free in the entertainment business. Mm-hmm. This is something that people want.
So fucked up.
Okay. It's kind of like you want to work at a major label. Okay. You think you know a lot about music. That's not what they need. They need someone who can make hit records and sell them.
Yeah.
Okay. So does your skill align? You read a lot of books. That does not make you a great writer. Although I've never found a great writer who didn't read a lot, whatever they're reading. You talk about Philip Roth. Philip Roth, his career was made by two things. How come my brain's not working? The famous
Goodbye Columbus won the National Book Award.
No. It was the one at Portnoy's Complaint. Portnoy's Complaint had a huge impact in the movie Goodbye Columbus. Yeah. Okay. So as far as you talk about Instagram and promoting, it's harder than ever to reach people. Mm-hmm. And success is slower than ever. But everybody on the planet is surfing voraciously, trying to find things they can recommend to others. So if they find it, they tell their friends about it. Mm-hmm. Okay? That is what you have to do. As far as hyping yourself, there's an elite level of people who do that relatively unsuccessfully. I mean, they have a hit record, then they disappear.
Yeah.
But it's really about the work. I'm dying for people to send me great stuff. I heard from a household name earlier today. She started a book. It's a bestseller. Okay. Mm-hmm. This is a legendary book. She says, this is too flower for me. I'm stopping. She is right. I have read that book. Okay. This is a book that, everybody. So this person has a career, sort of a middlebrow career, but the last book she wrote, I actually really liked. So it is hard, even if part of the audience likes it. But your goal is not to please the audience. It's to do something so fantastic that the audience will come to you.
Bob, this has been a pleasure. I hear my puppy barking in the background. I always ask a couple of quick questions at the end. Obviously, people listening, sign up to the Lefsetz Letter. Again, and there's no determined date, right? I mean, I was trying to look in your archives. It's just you're just popping them out when you feel like it, right? It's not like you release one a week.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And also you have one of the best podcasts, I think, available.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, because you do it like Mark Maron does it. And the way I try to do it, you ask the questions that people, want to know. You break it down. I mean, I listen to the Dan Wilson podcast. And for 45 minutes, I'm like, when is he going to ask about closing time and how they got signed and all that? And then the second half of that podcast, the way you even said it, you're like, well, how did you just get signed by A&M Records? That just doesn't happen. And you got the story out of him. A lot of people, those are the stories people want to hear. As a dude who failed as a musician, essentially, it was always the dream of like Tom Petty driving across the country, going in that phone booth, opening up the fucking record labels, calling them up. Oh, we love your stuff. We're going to sign you. You're writing about music in 2021 where it's totally ass backwards. I mean, again, I feel like we could talk for another hour about this, but I'm sure you got a whole lot of shit going
Okay, I got to ask you one big question, though.
Yeah.
You're quite obviously a Jewish guy.
Oh, most definitely.
Demeanor and look, as I am a Jew myself.
Yeah.
The last name Johnson, explain it to me.
Oh, yeah, my father's not Jewish. So my mother's last name is Danzig. She's from the Bronx, grew up in Co-op City. My father grew up in Bronx.
Spell the last name?
My mother's last name? Danzig. D-A-N.
Like just like the band Danzig?
Same thing.
Okay.
Yeah. And she grew up in Co-op City. Like in the TPs,
Believe me, I know Co-op City.
Definitely.
That's where Freedom Land used to be.
Yeah, I was born in Queens, then I grew up where they filmed The Sopranos. I mean, I literally watched them film The Sopranos. Again, the greatest television show ever.
I'm with you on that.
It's literally, I'm trying to actually get some of the writers, because I know they're doing the Talking Sopranos podcast.
Yeah.
Again, for people who, The Sopranos.
Bobby Bacala and Michael Imperioli.
It's the best. I mean, talking about television being, the art form of the times right now, I'm big into The Crown. I'm loving that show.
Too slow for me.
It's very slow. Very slow. But, again, people don't realize The Sopranos really paves the way for a lot of this television.
Yeah, but the reason The Sopranos is so great is I always give this one example. Meadow is in trouble, okay? And her parents want to discipline her. And they're afraid of disciplining her too hard. Say, you come up with a penalty.
Mm-hmm.
And then she comes down sheepishly, and she says, oh yeah, I think the way you can take away my gas credit card. And they look at each other, oh yeah. Then she goes up and calls her friends. She goes, I snowed my parents. They're clueless. That is life. That's why The Sopranos is so great.
Yeah. And I mean, again, I grew up around those people. I mean, I could tell stories about, my father almost bought a restaurant in northern New Jersey in 2003. And he tells a story about in the final meeting of the purchase, two dudes walk in he never met before. And they were introduced as, Tony and, Alfonso. And they were letting my father know that, not only do you have to pay these people, but you also have to pay us as well. And it was enough to fucking spook my daddy, and he didn't get the restaurant. I mean, it's real life. It happened. And obviously, again, we could do a Sopranos podcast, obviously. And the writing on that, I mean, Sopranos is it's the creme de la creme. It's the creme de la creme. I always ask this at the last question. Where do you buy your books from if you ever do buy books? Any bookstores in SoCal?
I always buy them from Amazon via Kindle.
So you haven't stepped in a bookstore in how long?
I used to love libraries. I was famous for that. And once you had the internet, a lot of that stuff became available online, and that was very intriguing. I will go in a bookstore. The problem with the bookstore is what is promoted to the priorities of the companies. In terms of hand-sold books, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's overrated. If you know the story of Amazon, and there's a really great book on it called The Everything Store. They started with personal recommendations. They had human beings making the recommendations. Then they found the algorithms sold more books. The algorithms were better than the people. I am not saying the same thing about music, because I think hand curation is really key. However, some of the Spotify products are really quite good. But I tend not to trust third parties. You walk into a store, most of the books people are very enthusiastic about are not my type of writing.
Yeah.
If a book is more about, the wordplay, the structure of the sentences, not my kind of book.
I agree.
Okay. But this is the stuff that tends to be promoted. In addition, bookstores have if you go to Powell's is it Portland. Powell's in Portland?
Yeah.
You go there, that's fascinating, because they have all the out of print books mixed in with the new print books.
Yeah.
So there's certain categories of books like skiing or tech books. I love going there and looking for it. But the average bookstore has a limited inventory. There's more inventory on Amazon. I mean, I've been on planes in South America downloading books. Okay. Someone told me about a book. I said, oh, I know this book. This will be good for the plane ride. I have no problem with stores existing. I have more of a problem with the reverse. People decrying digital. It's the same thing where I have yet to find a young person saying, spending too much on screens, too much time on screens. I got to stop. It's only the old people. Everything that is happening on the screen.
Yeah.
I only wish we had the screen when I was growing up.
Well, you're talking about growing up. I was born in 1987. I'm 33. So I was of that last generation of walking into Sam Goody, walking into Tower Records, buying CDs, walking in, and if, to put it in perspective, the last physical CD I bought was the Fleet Foxes' first album at a Starbucks. That was the last CD I bought, and that was 2009. Something like, but so the bookstore, it's still there. It's something, we as writers, people, I saw my book on the shelf today, and that's pretty fucking cool still. Bands.
I gotta tell you, I'm sure I own more vinyl records than anybody there, and I sold a great percentage of my CDs. Before I did that, I guarantee you I had more than anybody. I bought multiple computers from selling promotional CDs. Streaming is better than all of them.
Yeah.
Everything is at your fingertips. You can take it around the world. In terms of payment, what people don't understand is essentially 70% of revenue is given to rights holders on all these streaming services.
And you talk about that a lot in your letter.
They are not the devil.
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing is many people complain they're not making money on these streaming services who made money under the old model. The old model was you had to jump a hurdle, get a record label deal, and they would give you money. Most people who are not being listened to on streaming services, they're not good enough to be listened to.
Yeah.
Same thing with books. There's a certain percentage of books that sell. We can argue what the genre is and to, what degree. And you can say, well, a lot of this is crap. Well, to a degree, the audience wants to read crap. So if you want to write something more meaningful and you do it really well, maybe you have to understand the odds of lightning striking are low, but you can be fulfilled.
And you see it in the, again, I know you don't like talking about the jam band community. It's not your thing, but you see it in the jam band community where people, they're talking, if it's not Fish, if it's not Grateful Dead, I'm not going to listen to it. But there's room for everything, and there has to be good things and bad things.
There's not room for everything. There are things I've seen the band Twiddle. People hate them. I think they're pretty good. Okay.
Okay. I wasn't sure where that was going.
There is a scene, but what people don't realize, that scene peaked in the 90s. Could it come back? Could. Just like EDM. EDM has always existed. There are dance festivals now, but the peak was about 8 plus years ago. So the jam band scene will exist. And once again, it's easier to make a living in the music business than it is writing books. By the same token, to write a book, you don't have to leave home. You don't have to buy all this gear.
What was your first concert?
I cannot remember. My mother was a culture vulture. She recently passed. I was going to concerts at such a young age that I can't even remember. And I certainly went to rock concerts when I was in, single digits. I just can't remember.
I was 6 years old, Beacon Theater, Allman Brothers. My father took me. When they used to do Peeking at the Beacon. Yeah, when they used to do Peeking at the Beacon, that whole March run.
Yeah, the great thing with the Allman Brothers, they let you sit on stage. That was at the Beacon. That was really pretty good. Man. I don't want to, listen, the nature of my world is I have a lot of perks. I don't want to emphasize those. But you have to ask yourself, are you a fan or are you a creator? And you don't want to wake up at an old age, say, I wasn't myself. Give it a shot.
Yeah.
But if you give it a shot, now more than ever, it takes a long time. And you have to take them. I get email people, I'm going to do this for 2 years, and I'm going to go to graduate school. You can't tell it in 2 years. This is music.
Bob, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. And you're on Twitter, right?
Yeah, but since I reach, I got like 60 odd thousand followers on Twitter. I'm on reading Twitter, but I find posting on Twitter is pissing in the wind because, people don't always see it.
Isn't it crazy? I live in San Francisco, right? So, I've been at the heart of all this stuff. I've been seeing it happen. But it's amazing how quickly this stuff just Yeah.
As I say, I'm living on Twitter just to take the
Yeah.
pulse of the country, the
Yeah.
world.
There's just so
And
much
there's
shit.
certain people who tweet. The funniest thing is, since all the statistics are available, the people who've been tweeted six figures of times that have fewer than 10,000 fans. How many people are actually seeing these?
And that's what it is. I'm not gonna go too deep down the wormhole, but when you're talking about bands that are on, the club theater level, they could have 60,000 followers, post a photo, and it gets 50 likes. So really, what is that? I don't know. That's a whole nother fucking conversation. Bob, thanks so much, man.
Okay, Michael. Till next time.
Take care, Bob. Thank you.